Well, good afternoon and welcome back to another live iThemes training event. My name is Nathan Ingram, and today we are talking about using Amazon Polly to enhance WordPress. So, not many folks, at least sounding off in the chat room prior to kicking off today, not many folks are familiar with Amazon Polly. And I had heard about it here and there, but hadn't really tried it out until just recently. And I have been completely impressed with what Amazon Polly is able to do. So if you're just joining us and go to webinar, the chat room is live over at ithemes.com/chat. ithemes.com/chat. The handout is there in the chat room. I'm going to post that in one more time toward the bottom here so you guys can see it there in the chat. Make sure you've grabbed the handout. That's what we're looking at here. And this handout will step you all the way through setting up Polly on the Amazon side, as well as making use of the WordPress plugin that brings Amazon Polly to WordPress. So let's just start off talking a little bit about what in the world is Amazon Polly. Now, Polly, which is located right here at aws.amazon.com/Polly, it turns text into lifelike speech. And they have a number of voices for different languages. And it is one of the best text-to-speech processors I have ever heard in my entire life. Now, here's the thing. I've been looking at text-to-speech for quite a while. Matter of fact, one of my very first computer was a TI-99 4A, Texas Instruments computer. You plugged it up to the television, and one of the first things I bought for it, I'll never forget this, it was $50. I had to mow a lot of yards to afford it, but it plugged into the side of the TI-99, and it was a speech synthesizer. It was about the size of a Bluetooth speaker, a little small Bluetooth speaker today, and it just plugged right in there, and you got this really awful 1980s robotic voice. Remember those? Really terrible, I mean, barely understandable, didn't pronounce things very well. So speech has come a long way since those days. And Amazon Polly is on the level of Siri and Alexa and Google Home in being able to simply process text to speech and make it sound like a regular speaking voice. It's pretty remarkable. So what Amazon Polly allows you to do, since it's an AWS service, if you have an app or something like that, you can tap right into it and build apps that talk. So maybe some of you have seen, how many of you use Pocket? Does anybody use Pocket to store articles? Pocket is a great service that, has a browser extension and you can save articles into it. Pocket now has just added a read me the article feature. And I don't know if they're using Polly, but they might be. But it's that same kind of thing where you can take any kind of text and it just turns it into speech. Now, this is incredibly helpful also when it comes to WordPress websites. Because what this will allow you to do is literally within 10 minutes or less, you can have Polly set up on WordPress and it'll just have a play button right there at the top of your post or any content on WordPress, and it'll play the content with lifelike audio. Now, why is this important? Well, a number of reasons. First of all, and probably most importantly, is accessibility. How great would it be to have your website read itself to a person that is visually impaired? Now, there are a lot of screen readers that are out there, but they're pretty poor. The Amazon Polly experience is a lot better with lifelike text to speech. Also, and this is where it gets just absolutely amazing, Polly can do scroll too far here. Polly can do on-the-fly text and audio translation into multiple languages. So built into Polly is a machine translation function that lets you convert your posts into a different language just like that. It's a lot like Google Translate, but not only does it create the text of that language, it also creates the audio in different languages. It's really amazing. It also gives you a bunch of different voices you can choose from. And one of the last things I'm going to show you today is that this is just really amazing. With Polly installed on your WordPress site, not only can you have the audio there on each page, hit the play button, listen to the audio, but it automatically can create a podcast out of all of that audio, so that the end result of this is you add a post, and if Polly is active, when you publish that post, it's going to automatically do text-to-speech and add the play button on the post. It will also add that post to your podcast so that it's immediately available for podcast. So like, if somebody subscribes to your post podcast, as soon as that post is published, well, now you've got a new post on your podcast as well. So yeah, I was really blown away by this. I'm in the process of relaunching one of my longest standing clients' websites, and she is an author of Christian books here in the Birmingham, Alabama area, and she does a weekly devotional email out to her very large list of customers. And those have been blog posts for a while now as well, but now we're going to turn into a podcast by simply adding Polly to that devotionals custom post type. It's really, really cool. And if we have time as we wrap up, I'll show you how we have that implemented on that site now. So here's how it works, basically. Polly converts your text into an MP3 file that is stored in an S3 bucket in your AWS account. Okay, there are a lot of acronyms there, but hopefully you're following me. So if you're using S3, that's really the cheapest and simplest way to go. It just puts the MP3 file into an S3 bucket for which it randomly generates a name, and I'll show you that in just a minute. You can turn off S3 and just have all those MP3s stored in your WordPress media library. That's possible. I wouldn't recommend that because real quick that media library is going to get pretty large. But once those MP3 files are generated, they are accessible on your website or through an app. It does the audio translation that I mentioned. And then you also get a selection of voices for the languages you choose. So this is pretty cool. I'm just going to show you here a few of them that are for English. So for English, there are 8 voices. Looks like there are 3 male and 5 female. So Joanna is the default female voice, and here's what she sounds like. She's going to read this text right here.
Hi, my name is Joanna. I will read any text you type here.
So pretty good, right? Now let's listen to Justin. He's the default male voice.
Hi, my name is Justin. I will read any text you type here.
Actually, that's the kid. Matthew is the default male voice.
Hi, I'm Matthew. I will read any text you type here.
So pretty cool, right? I mean, that's really, as far as text-to-speech goes, that is pretty amazing. Let me actually get some lyrics from some of our television theme blog posts here, and let's let Matthew read this.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship. I have always wanted to have a neighbor just like you. I've always wanted to live in a neighborhood with you.
Pretty nice, right? It also, of course, will deal with punctuation. So if we want to have a pause here, we can do a ... or whatever.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that started from this tropic port aboard this tiny ship.
So pretty cool. It really, really works well. Now, we can also, by the way, there's a few French voices. We'll have to get to translation in a minute, but there's a number of different voices for each language, including, look at all these, Mandarin Chinese, Danish, Dutch. There are Australian and British English accents as well, even a Welsh accent, French Canadian, German, Hindi, Icelandic. Look at all these languages that are available. So lots of different options for you to choose from. English US, there we go. So many, many different options.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale of a fateful trip that's...
And you just have to figure out which one you like best. But lots of different options. There's a full voice list here. There's a YouTube link I've given here that will let you listen to all the voices one after another, just right there on one YouTube video. Or you can play with it here on the Poly page once you've got it set up in your AWS. So you might ask yourself, how much does this sort of thing cost? And this is the beautiful thing. It is totally free for the first 12 months, for the first 5 million characters per month. Now that is cheap. Like most of the S3 services, it is in the AWS services like S3, it's very, very inexpensive. So for the first 12 months, totally free, up to 5 million characters. That's a lot each month. Then after that, you're billed at $4 per million characters. Now, how does that actually shake out? So a typical 500-word blog post is about 3,000 characters, so it would cost you 2 cents to convert to text-to-speech. So pretty reasonable. Now, there's the full explanation of pricing is there. I've given you that link. But it is very, very, very inexpensive. So it could simply and easily be added to your site and really do some pretty cool stuff in WordPress. All right, so let's talk about the first step of this, which is setting up Poly on the Amazon side. Now, if you already have an AWS account, you don't need to do this. If you already are using Amazon S3 or some other Amazon service, you already have an AWS account, you can skip that. But I've given you all of the steps to do this right here. And if you follow these one at a time, you'll very quickly and easily set up an AWS account. Now, to start, you go here, you create an AWS account, you complete all the information, you do the basic support plan, then it takes you to create a user. Now, what I would suggest, if you already have an AWS account, maybe you're using Amazon S3 for storing backups or podcast audio or some other whatever, you've already got an S3 account, you already then have an AWS user, I would suggest that you create another one for Poly simply because it's going to, you can restrict the access controls better. So that's what I would do here. Create a new user within your same AWS account. And this is how you do it. You sign in, you click your username in the black bar, you choose security credentials. That's just all right here. Security credentials. And then you can actually add stuff. So just follow these instructions. Add the user. This is the trickiest part. You have to attach existing policies to this user. So here's how that works. We're going to call this one test, and it's going to be programmatic access. That's all here in the steps. Now we're going to attach existing policies directly to the user, and we're going to type in these 3 policies. It's these policies that let this user access Poly. So the next one is S3 full access. And then we want translate read only. All right, so we've checked all 3 of our policies. We're going to review, and we can create a user. So just that quick, I created a quick test user. Now, here's the thing. You're going to copy this access ID, and you're going to click show and copy the secret access key. It's very, very important that you save these in a safe place because you can't get the secret access key again. It's a one-shot deal. So you'll have to recreate the user otherwise. So make sure you save somewhere very safe your access key and the secret key, because that's what you're going to need to connect to the AWS account. Okay, so once you have your user set up, that's it. You're done on the Amazon side. Now we start putting Poly into WordPress. So I went through that kind of quick. Is everybody together? Any questions up to this point about creating the Amazon user? Once you set up an account if you need to, create the user, you're done. Any questions about this? Where did I go to create the user? I went, you just follow these steps. You're going to go to the blue Add User button. So if we go to Security Credentials, blue Add User, And then you just follow these rest of these steps. Okay. So now we have our AWS account set up. So let's look at Amazon Polly for WordPress. So let's go to the back end of our WordPress site. And I have already installed and activated the Amazon Polly plugin. It's right there. Now, what this plugin is going to do, and by the way, this is created by AWS Labs, so this is their official plugin for WordPress. This is going to connect the Polly service to WordPress. It's going to convert text-to-speech whenever you publish or update post types of your choosing. It's going to embed the Polly audio player on those post types. It's going to let you, once you get everything set up correctly, bulk update all the posts of your selected post types so that everybody gets Polly right off the bat. It's also going to let you access that machine translation and create that basic podcast. So Doug is asking, does it work with custom post types? Absolutely, it works with everything. So as long as it's a regularly defined post type within WordPress, it works. So products for WooCommerce, if you have your own custom post type, like I was talking about that my client has for her devotionals, then you just add it in there and it works. And I'll show you how to do that. All right, so let's set up Polly for WordPress. So we've got the plugin installed and activated. Now we're going to go over here to General, and this is where we put in our access key and our secret key. Now remember, you better have saved that secret key because otherwise you're going to have to go back and recreate another Amazon user because you can't ever see that secret key again. So save that thing off the side. But that's literally all you have to do. Drop in your access key, your secret key. Choose what region you want the S3 bucket to go in. I usually choose Ohio because it's centrally located to the United States. This will be on by default. It's going to create this bucket for you automatically in your S3 account. If you're using CloudFront, you can put that in there. Now here is where you get to define what post types to use. Now the only part of this that I really don't like is that it doesn't give you a list of all the custom post types on your site. So you have to type them. So you have to enter the slug for the post types. So it would be post or page or product. And if you want to have multiple post types, you just put a space, no commas, just a space. So if we want this to work for posts and pages, we just type post space page, and that's all we have to do. So this is now set up and working, and it's Polly is active for posts and pages. We've got WooCommerce going here. If we want to add products, we could do that. Product is the slug for the custom post type of WooCommerce. So do that, and it is now active for WooCommerce products as well. But for our purposes, I'm going to confine it just to posts. You can put whatever you want to there. That makes sense? Just make sure you separate multiple post types with a space. That's all you have to do. So once we have the general settings set up, we then move down to text-to-speech. So at this point, Polly is not doing anything. It's simply connected to our S3. And if we look at here, we've got a bucket full. It has nothing in it, actually. But this is our empty bucket that has been created, ending in CA08. So that ought to match what is here. Yeah. So this is the randomly generated hash of characters. And we now have an S3 bucket in our account ready to receive the audio that Polly is going to create. So we move here to text-to-speech. We're going to enable that and hit save. So once we do that, a whole bunch of settings appear that we're going to step through here. Carrie is asking, can you create your own S3 bucket to keep your AWS organized? Unfortunately, not right now, because this automatically assigns the bucket, and you can't change that. So that's another little drawback. So just be aware of that. Okay. So let's look at some settings here. First of all, there's the sample rate. Now, if you're familiar with audio, this is basically the higher the number, the better the audio. So the difference will be nice, crystal clear CD quality type audio versus like an old telephone audio. So there's more compression. It's just not as clear. It's a little muddy, right? So I always leave that set at 22, the 22 one. Now here we have all of these voices that have popped up. Now, why English? Well, it looks over in our general settings to see what the site language is, and our site language is English, right? So those are the voices it gives us over here that match English. So we can choose any of these names. I'm going to leave it Matthew for now. We can go back and play with it in just a little bit. So we're going to leave this alone for Matthew. This is really cool and kind of creepy. You can click the checkbox and it will automatically create breathing noises at appropriate intervals. It honestly sounds so natural when you do this, though. I like that a lot. So the question is, who is Matthew? Matthew is the default male voice of Amazon Polly. And we heard him. Let's see. Let's go to just a second. We go to Polly, and we heard Matthew right here.
Hi, I'm Matthew.
Right? So that's the kind. I think he's probably the best voice, and he's the one that comes up by default. Now, there's an option here for enabling SSML support. Now, SSML is I've given you a link here to explain it, but it's basically additional markup that you can put into your content. Where, if you want to emphasize a certain word in the text to speech, you surround it with emphasis brackets. So it's just like an HTML tag. Emphasis, your word that you want to emphasize, /emphasis, and it turns it off. So it's just like HTML markup. SSML is a W3C. What's the word I'm looking for here? It's a standard. So this is not just Polly related, but they've implemented this SSML option into Polly, so you can really customize the level at which you're doing text-to-speech. So I've given you a doc there. That gets pretty complicated. Probably not going to get into that today. You can also, and this is pretty cool, you can specify here any custom lexicons that you've created. Now this is incredibly powerful, because especially if you're doing some sort of a technical site that has lots of technical words, maybe Polly doesn't pronounce them correctly, and you need to, you can define individually the pronunciations of certain words in your lexicon. Now, it's a little tricky to do, and I'll probably show you an example at the end if we have some time, but it's nifty that you can do this because it gives you total control over the pronunciation of certain things. Audio speed is also very helpful. When someone is being read to, a lot of times it's nice to turn it down to like 90% rather than 100. We'll leave it at 100 because that's default. But you can slow down or speed up the audio depending on, what kind of audio it is. This lets you set where the player is going to show up. Is it going to be before the post or after the post, or just don't show it, which is kind of counterproductive. Player label, you can put a label over the top of the player. When I create a new post, is Polly going to be enabled or disabled? We'll leave it enabled. And you can also autoplay the Polly audio if you want, but I think that's rude, so we'll leave that unchecked. So we're going to save changes here. Oh, and we want to add the post title to audio. That way, when it generates the text to speech, it's going to start with the title of the post. All right, so we've saved our options. The question in the chat for do not show, where was that? That was right here. The reason you'd want to do not show, there's not a short code anywhere that I'm aware of to place the player. There may be, and I just missed it. But the reason you'd want to say do not show is if you just wanted to maybe create a podcast out of the audio and not actually have the audio playable on the page or post. So it gives you that option. Now, once you've done this, my recommendation to you is to go into a post or whatever you're going to convert and just tinker around a little bit and see how it sounds. Settle on your voice, settle what you want. Then you can go down here at the bottom and click bulk update, and Polly will process all of the content you've specified that you want to translate text to speech. So once you get everything set, do a bulk update and you're good to go. Your whole site is now converted. So let's do that. Marcy's asking, can it be activated on some posts or pages and not others? Yes, absolutely. So when we did that setting over here in general and we said post, what that did, let me just open up our, well, I didn't mean to do that. Let's go new tab. Okay. So when we edit a post, and I've given us a Rickroll here, it adds a meta box for Polly right here. And if we look at pages, there's no meta box. However, if we type in pages here and we refresh, whoop, did it save? Oh, it's page, not pages. That adds the meta box. So by adding the post type here, all it does is drop the meta box into that particular page. Now, there's still no audio created for any of this at all until you click update. As soon as you click update, then Polly is going to convert this page, post, whatever, into an MP3 file as a red audio. It takes like 5 seconds. It's pretty cool. You will notice a slight increase in the time it takes to update a page or a post. But that's because it's actually crunching out the MP3 file for it. And it's pretty remarkable that it's doing that in the short amount of time that it takes. So what I'm going to do is for this post, which has the audio to Never Gonna Give You Up, let's go back to Matthew's voice here. It had the other voice because I was playing with this yesterday. All I'm going to do at this point, I'm going to click update. We're going to give it a minute. It is now creating the audio. Okay, it's done. That's how long it took to crunch all that out to audio. And if we go back now and look at our S3 bucket, there it is. There's the MP3 file. So let's look at this now on the front side of the site. Look, we have a really pretty play bar right here. We can download the MP3 file if we want.
Never gonna give you up. We're no strangers to love. You know the rules and so do I. A full commitment's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy. I just want to tell you how I'm feeling. Gonna make you understand.
All right.
Never gonna give you up.
All right. So that's how it works. It was that simple. Once we connected it to Amazon, we simply update the post, and that's it. Carrie wants to know, will it still play if you change the name of the file in AWS? I seriously doubt it. We can try real quick, but let's see. Actions, rename. Let's copy the name so we don't screw it up. And we're going to call this Carrie's Idea. But my guess is in the WordPress database, it's matched up the name of the file.
Never gonna give you up.
Well, maybe not. That's weird. No, it does not. That was cached earlier. So it has to be what it's called. You cannot change any of that. It is what it is.
Never gonna give you up.
There you go. All right, so that's you wanted to hear some other voices? Let's do it. So at this point, we can choose. Let's choose Nicole from Australian English. Now, when we hit update, it's creating a new MP3 file. So we reload our page here. And this is now a new file. It was just created. But it does not keep both. It only keeps one. Now, Carrie's talking about tough to arrange and organize the files. You don't touch it. Just leave it alone. Because Polly it handles its The WordPress plugin attaches everything to posts. Just don't fool with it. So let's listen to the Australian voice.
Never gonna give you up. We're no strangers to love. You know the rules and so do I. A full commitment's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy.
Right? So now one thing you need to be aware of is every time you change the voice, it's sending these characters to Amazon and it's counting against that first, your X number of characters per month. So just be aware of that. That is especially important if you have to start paying for it. So, the cost to do this is, it's less than a penny, obviously. But just be aware that every time you change the voices, it is you're accessing the Poly service. So a couple of questions. Paul, would we want to download the MP3 file and upload to iTunes or some other real podcast service? Yeah, and we'll hold the podcasting questions for later because we're going to talk about that. Susan wants to know, having Poly on the WordPress site, does it add it in the page load file? Does the MP3 have to download? No, because what's it actually does not download the MP3 until you click play, and then it's streaming the MP3 from S3. Marcy wants to know, if you activate it on a page, deactivate it, and decide to activate it later, does it make a second S3 file? That's a great question. All right, so let's disable text-to-speech and update this post, and then let's look at our S3 bucket, and it's gone. Yes, so it deleted it. So there's your answer. Let's do British English. Let's do Brian the Brit. Oh, Doug, great point. E-learning courses? How cool would that be? To add an audio.
Never gonna give you up. We're no strangers to love. You know the rules and so do I. A full commitment's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy.
That's pretty good. Pretty good. Carrie's saying, wonder if you get charged for the deleted file. Not on S3, but every time, you're accessing Poly every time you do this. So every time we've updated the voice, it's adding to our character count for the month. So just be aware of that. Yeah, the lyrics. Well, we had to have something fun to play with, right? It even has Indian English, which I find really funny. This is good. It's really funny on this particular song.
Never gonna give you up. We're no strangers to love. You know the rules and so do I. A full commitment's what I'm thinking of. You wouldn't get this from any other guy.
Carrie is asking, you could paste the content and use the AWS test area to test the voices. Absolutely. Yeah, so we could just copy this and, and go over to our let's see, services. I think I can get to it here. Yeah, right here. And choose whatever.
We're no strangers to love, you know the rules and so do.
We're no strangers to love, you know the rules, and so do I. Have full commitments.
It's not respecting the line breaks here, but yeah, so you could test them here, correct, and not cost you anything. But once you get it set the way you want it, let's go back to Matthew. Now we have him set.
Never gonna run around and desert you. Never gonna make you cry. Never gonna give. Give.
So there you go. Right? So pretty cool, I think. Now comes the even more fun part, which is using Poly for translation. Now, let's go down here to translate under Amazon Poly. And again, we're going to turn on translation support and save changes. So we're going to enable our translation support. Let's enable audio for translations. And let's just pick a few languages here. Let's do Chinese, Czech. Let's just do the first 4. Chinese, Czech, French, and German will be our 4 languages. You can turn on all these if you want. We'll save the changes. All right, now these are active. Looks like there's not a voice for Czech for whatever reason. That's weird. Let's do Italian. Okay, so there's we're going to do those 4. Now let's go back to our post. And underneath here, notice now there's a button for translate. Okay, now here's the thing. There is no bulk translate option. So you have to click manually the translate button for every post or page that you want to translate or product. So you can't do this in bulk, unfortunately. Now look here. This is a neat thing that comes under translate. How much is this going to cost me to convert? It's going to cost me 1/3 of 1 cent. Okay, I can handle that. So let's click translate. Now do not navigate away from this page because this is a status bar. It's not very clear in the UI. But, all right, there it goes. So the status bar is going. We need to wait for it to convert. It'll take just a second. So this does take a little bit longer because it is not only making audio, it's also having to do the machine translation first. So we give this just a second to complete. And this, when we see the flags that represent the languages, it's not only going to switch the audio to that language, it's actually going to switch the page content over to that language as well. Okay, so translation complete. Let's update the page and view the page on the site. All right, now look, we've got these flags. Let's go to Chinese. How many of you ever wanted to hear or get a Rickroll in Chinese? Well, here you go. Look at that.
我们不是陌生人去爱，你知道规矩，我也知道。一个完整的承诺是我所想的，你不会从别的男人那里得到的。我只是想告诉你我的感受。
There you go. So right, it not only translates the audio, it translated the text as well. So let's try it over here in, this is French.
Nous ne sommes pas des étrangers à aimer. Vous connaissez les règles et moi aussi. Un engagement complet, c'est ce à quoi je pense. Tu n'aurais pas obtenu ça d'un autre.
Pretty nice, right? Here's German.
Wir sind keine Fremden zu lieben. Du kennst die Regeln und ich auch. Eine volle Verpflichtung ist, woran ich denke.
Pretty nice. And then Italian.
Non siamo estranei da amare. Tu conosci le regole e anche io. Un impegno totale è quello che penso. Non l'avresti preso da nessun altro.
Pretty nifty, right? So you've got all these languages that you can draw from, and you have the options for the flags, and it converts mostly. There's some issues, but for machine translation, it's pretty good. Paul is asking, is it better than Google Translate? I have no idea. That'd be something you have to research. But Google Translate doesn't give you the audio like this. So I don't know any of these languages, so I cannot tell you how good the translation is, other than English. And English is 100% correct. Okay. So, translation. Pretty nifty, right? Any questions about this part so far? Oh, Susan, you speak Italian? So the Italian was not bad. Very good. All right. So now let's look at the next level here, which is creating a polycast, is what they call it. Creating a polycast. Taking the audio and making it into a podcast. Let's turn off the translations. All right. And let's go to podcast. So we're going to check the box here. Oh, Susan was asking before we get too far away from this. Is there a way to see how many times the translations are used, like to get some analytics? Unfortunately, no, that's not part of the plugin. It'd be a nice suggestion, though. You could give the plugin author that suggestion. All right. Oh, actually, you know what? I wonder, just a second. There's a query string. Look right here. Amazon AI language equals Deutsch, right? DE. There's probably a way, you might have to use Google Tag Manager or something along those lines to track those query strings in the URL. So the answer is maybe. There you go. All right, so back to the polycast. We're going to check this box and enable the polycast, and some additional settings appear. What is my iTunes contact email? nathan@ithemes.com. What is the category? It is education. I have no explicit content on my webinars. You can upload an icon for the podcast in the customizer. We'll do that in a minute. How many podcasts do we want on the feed? Let's say 100. You can only do certain post categories if you want. And the author will be the author of the post. So we're going to save that. And look what we've got. There's now a polycast available at that link. And this is a correctly formatted XML file that is ready to be submitted to iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, Spotify, all of your regular podcast locations. So you simply give them this URL and fill out their form, and you're ready to go. So you'd want to go ahead and, go into the customizer, and right here you can upload your iTunes image. Let's give them Rick. And you have all your content there as well. So there's my podcast image that just appeared there. And that's it. That's all you have to do. Now watch this. Let's just watch our feed here. So currently, if we parse this, there's really only one item in our podcast, and it's never going to give you up. There's the link to the S3 bucket for the audio, and there's an excerpt of the post. Now let's go and add another post. Got an ugly short code in there. You know what? I wonder if it's. I have not tried this yet. I wonder if it's smart enough to know that's a short code and it should leave it alone. So let's just. And by the way, if you do this manually, you can choose different voices for each different thing. So let's do this one as Joanna. Update. Now Polly knows we've just created another audio file. And so, look, now we have our second entry on our podcast. So, as you would use this, or as your client would use this regularly, they go in, they post a post, it's automatically created to audio, and the next item is added to the podcast feed automatically. So that is pretty cool, I think. Now let's see if it knows what to do with that short code. Where was the post? Oh, it's here. There we go.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale. WPMK_PDF.
Nope. Okay, so now that short code didn't do anything, but I'm curious. That's got me curious now about what would happen if we actually put like a gravity form. Let's just see if it, and it's a short code, how it handles that. So I have not yet tried that. So let's activate gravity forms, and let's put that form in. Okay, so the content of the post is actually this, but it renders out a form on the front end. So let's see what actually happens.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale. Sample form.
Okay.
Name. First. Last. Email. Comment. jQuery document. Bind form _ post _
Ooh.
render. Function event.
That's not
Format.
good.
Current page.
Okay, so there's a problem. The takeaway here is don't use this on a page with a gravity form. So what it's found, let's see, it's a bunch of, probably some markup after the gravity form. Yeah, look at that. It found all of the scripts. Okay, so that's something that I'm sure they're aware of. But, you know, in a post, it should not be a big deal because you wouldn't necessarily have a form inside a post. Now, there was a good question about what happens if you have a picture with alt text. Now, let's put old Rick in there, and the alt text is Rickroll. So let's put Rick in there. Update. We're going to crunch new audio.
Just sit right back and you'll hear a tale. Image. Rickroll. Just sit right back and you'll hear
Look
a
at
tale,
that.
tale of a faithful...
Okay, so it does. It says image and it reads the alt text. So that is fantastic for accessibility. Very cool. Pretty nifty, right? All right, any other questions so far? All right, I think the last thing I wanted to share with you guys was the custom lexicons. And I just want to touch on this because it's pretty complex and we can go down a rabbit hole pretty quickly with it. But this is something I ran into implementing this Poly plugin on a client site that I mentioned earlier on. And the issue was this. When you go to Poly, and this is... Again, the client site that I'm working on is for a client who is a Christian author, an author of Christian books in Birmingham, where I'm located. And she does a devotional email out to her user list. And being that it's a devotion that's based on the Bible, there are Bible books that are referenced. And so you might have something that says like 1 Peter as a book of the Bible. Now, when Polly reads this, it says
1 Peter.
1 Peter. And so that's a problem because that's not how we want it to be pronounced. So what I did was create a custom lexicon, and I have given you a link to this just as an example in this Dropbox file, which I can't preview because it's not. Hang on a minute. Let's actually open. There it is. All right. Let's open with Coda. Okay. Well, this is going to be a continual problem. Just a minute. Because especially on the Mac, .pls is the format that it wants it in, but that's also the format of a playlist file. So what I'm going to do, it opens iTunes. Hang on a minute. Okay. Let me rename this to .txt. Yes. And now we'll be able to see it. Okay. So this is simply an XML file. And I got this format from the link that is in the handout, right? Here in the w3.org, it gives all sorts of examples of how all these pronunciation things work. Now, there's lots of different, this page will explain this to you. Now, all I had to do was say, all right, here's what you find in the text, and here's how you pronounce it as an alias. So this is all the books of the Bible that have a 1 or a 2 or a 3 and how you ought to pronounce them. And also if something says V period, that should be pronounced verse. And sometimes the website address is listed at the bottom. So this is, you pronounce the whole thing. So basically, I've just told it, when you see this, pronounce it like this. Now, in the documentation, there, you can actually get into changing the phonetic pronunciation of the word. And that's really detailed. I'm not even going to get into that today because I'm not quite sure I understand how to do it yet. But you just have to learn that part. But by uploading this custom index, it fixed the problem. So here is one of the devotionals. It is using Polly, and this would have said 1 Peter, right? But here's what it says.
Brokenness and Glory, 1 Peter 1, Part 2.
There you go. So it totally works when you define with a custom lexicon. It's a little complicated. Prepare for your brain to explode just a little bit, but stick with it and you will be able to figure it out. You just have to dig through some stuff to make that part work. But it's pretty good right out of the box. P. Tallman, on accessibility, is this helpful for eyesight impaired? Can they see the player as opposed to using a reader? No, but a screen reader will actually see that object, this HTML object, and give you the option to play it. Marcy, I had to enter each lexicon entry separately. Okay, so in this XML file, this lexeme, this is each occurrence of a particular word. This is what you find in the text. This is how you pronounce it. And you just stack those one after another into a single custom lexicon that you then upload into Polly, and it processes. And that's done, let's see, that is done here in the AWS. Once you're logged into the AWS control panel or console, you go to Polly, and then right down here, there's customized pronunciations, and you can upload a lexicon right there. And that applies to all the Polly stuff in your account. Now, the one thing you do have to do, if you're using a custom lexicon, is go over here to text-to-speech and type in, it has to be exactly the same. So this is called, this is called TFB, is the name of that lexicon. And that, you can type that right here, and that will then apply that custom lexicon to all the text-to-speech in your WordPress site. Does that make sense? Doug is asking, based on the shortcode test, will it speak stuff within, so will it say like P in HTML elements or H2 or span? It shouldn't. Let's look at something and test that though. So let's go here and let's make this an H2. Just like that. And that'll test. So we'll save that. We've got our new audio.
Never gonna give you up. We're no strangers to love. You know the rules and...
No, see, it ignores all standard HTML tags. Right? So that's Polly. With just a very few steps, you can connect really, really good text-to-speech to your WordPress site and add that player to any post type you want, and even create a podcast and translations from it. So pretty cool. So who has a use for Polly right now? Really inexpensive to implement. If you're working with clients on this, I would suggest that you have them set up their own Amazon account so that you're not billed for all that stuff, even though it shouldn't be very much at all still. Girl who can't type, does it pick up any inline CSS? I don't think so. But it's going to be within, it would be, for example, inside this H2 tag. It's going to ignore everything within standard HTML tags. Pretty cool stuff. So when I found that, I thought, I think you guys should really check this out, because Poly is one of those things that it's a genius technology. And even if you don't have a use for it right now, this is something to stick in your toolbox because chances are you might run across something that would be very, very useful. All right, any last questions or comments before we wrap up today? Marcy's saying, been talking about adding audio, but nobody really wants to do it, so this is a good answer. Yeah, it really could be. You will be able to tell it's machine audio, but it's good enough to where most people, I think, would listen to it without a problem. So we'll have replay of this up in about an hour or so. I want to remind you of the upcoming webinars that are coming up next week on iThemes Training. We have Anna Blanche Rabe with us next Thursday. She'll be talking about business entity basics explained. So this is a good time of the year to be looking at your business, and if you're in the right kind of entity for tax purposes, she'll be talking all about that. Plugin Roundup for November is coming up also the week following. So a number of things that are happening. Also, I want to let you know that there is a new paid webinar, a couple of them actually. Let's see. Yes, 2 paid webinars. If you are an iThemes Toolkit member, coming up on Tuesday of this coming week, is preparing your WooCommerce website for the holidays. Marcel Schmitz, who's the developer of the iThemes Sales Accelerator plugin, this is a premium webinar if you have or you're working with clients to make sure that website is optimized for holiday traffic. That's coming up on Tuesday. So if you haven't registered for that and you're a member, be sure to do that. If you are not a member, just Google this title, and it's a pretty inexpensive webinar to join if you're not a Toolkit member. Also, we just booked this one. In a few weeks, Joe Casabona is going to be back with us on designing themes for Gutenberg. And this is coming up on Tuesday, November 18th. It's a 3-hour course, and that's the week before Gutenberg is scheduled to drop. So Joe's going to be talking all about how to build themes or tweak your existing themes for Gutenberg support. So that's going to be a really good one. Marcy, there should be the email that went out about that. Yeah, like you're mentioning for the Gutenberg webinar. No, there will be no tax evasion webinars anytime soon. However, we did have a webinar earlier this year featuring my accountant, who is awesome, talking all about various accounting strategies. It was called Ask the Accountant. It was a total Q&A type webinar. We had a lot of good questions and items covered during that one. So that's it. Make sure if you have not yet joined the iThemes Slack group, send me an email at nathan@ithemes.com, and I'll get you added into there. It's a good place to ask questions and get notifications for upcoming webinars. Also, if you have not added the iThemes training calendar to your calendar, you can do that with this link right here. It'll download an iCal link that'll keep your calendar updated with all the latest additions to iThemes training webinars. So that's it. We are wrapping up a minute or so early. Thanks for hanging out with me for the last hour. It's been a lot of fun. Amazon Poly is pretty awesome. And I'll see you next time here on iThemes Training, where we go further together.